Hello everyone. I think it's 11:35, so we will get started. Uh, am I audible and visible clearly, everyone? If you can just type so that I will get to know. Okay, great. So let's get started. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to wish all the students a very happy Children's Day. I know you must have some plan along with your family to go out, but we will ensure this 1 hour will be worth your time. Okay, so as a part of our attempt to make parents aware of the right career and education of children, we have launched this Aspire series, which is nothing but a wisdom sharing series with all our students and parents. So for today's Aspire series, we have Siddhant, who has cracked JEE Advanced with flying colors. So we will hear from him what it takes to secure such marks in one of the toughest exam in Indian education field. Okay, so welcome Siddhant. I know you must be very busy meeting people, receiving their call, guiding juniors. So we would like to thank you for joining this webinar to guide our JEE and NEET aspirants. Okay, so without further delay, I think we will get started. So first of all, Siddhant, we would like to know as a student how you were from the schooling days. What was your score in 10th, 12th standard? Were you the topper since beginning? So if you can share a little bit about you, that will help all the students on the call.
Okay, so this is somewhat of a psychological aspect as well. I was the youngest in my family, so I used to I had to listen to everybody, and all the elders had to listen to their inputs as well. So when it came to studies, I started to like being independent. Like I wanted to do things my way. So ever since school, I was like my parents didn't have to force me to sit and study or stuff like that. So I used to sit my own manage things on my own. I used to play a lot as well. I played many sports in school, and I had a particular liking for movies. And like it's not just about science. I used to like history also, geography, literature. I liked reading, but I didn't like having to remember it and uh, putting it in the answer sheet for the exams. So that is how, and I used to perform well in school as well. That was and I had a particular liking for science. So that is essentially why I took up JEE. And I got 97.17% in 10th boards. And although after that, the 12th boards, they were cancelled, and basically my college was just a dummy college to support me for my JEE preparation. So they just I recommend you to believe my 12th marks, but I got 98.17% in 12th as well. And again, it was just they gave it randomly. I mean, I have most of it. I was in state board, so usually 98.17 is usually around the state topper of the HSC board exams. So 12 boards is not something that I would recommend you to consider for my percentage, but yeah, you guys will have to give 12 boards, and boards has its own significance. So although JEE is very important and more important as compared to boards, but still you shouldn't completely ignore and just skip on to JEE.
Okay, good. So when did you decide that you want to prepare for JEE? When that thought came in mind, it was your decision, your parents, or how you came to know about this?
So I never had like a particular fixed mindset that I have to take up JEE and then get into IIT or get prepare for this, and then so I never really had a long. It's like I never had one particular direction to go in. There were some interests and disinterests that I had in mind. So like I definitely would not have taken up arts or commerce because of some aspects of it. So that is why I took up science, and I started my JEE prep in ninth grade. But there were some complications involved. So what happened was that I started JEE, but I had no background about it as such. Like I just picked it up because I liked science, and I was interested in it. So I started. I think different classes call it different names. My class called it pre-foundation batch. So when I joined it in ninth grade, uh, there were people who had studied a lot about it, studied math, physics, chemistry to a higher level. They had ideas about JEE, much better ideas about JEE as compared to me. So I started to lose confidence, and I felt like I had already lost in this competition before the competition even actually began. So I was about to give up JEE around that time, but then from motivation that I received from my parents, my teachers, and somewhat from my friends as well, I continued. And then around 11th, I actually had the willingness and motivation to start working for JEE. So around July of 2000, when my 11th started, so that was when I actually started working, preparing for JEE, and having that mindset that I need to, like, not need to, but having that I can crack this exam and I will at least try and give my best. Before that, it was just having, I was trying to run away from it actually, in blunt words.
Yeah, so that is great to know that someone who has cracked JEE with such a good marks has gone through this phase where he felt that I am left out or what, right? So student on the call, I want you to make a note of it, right? It is not someone who cracks the JEE is topper from the beginning, right? It is your dedication and continuous consistency over the year that will uh, make you part of this type of league, right? So I want, if you guys, I will suggest you guys have a pen and paper, whatever you like in this session, that you note it down. That will help you in preparing your plan for the preparation of JEE and NEET. And uh, during our discussion, we will be discussing on all different aspects. We will be hearing more from Siddhant. I will be speaking less and he will be speaking more. But during the time, if you have any specific question you want to ask to Siddhant, just type it in on chat window. If it is not very specific, we will definitely cover it on this call. Okay. Hope that is okay with everyone. So I think Siddhant, most of the students on the call, I know in their mind they will have a question that how you were managing time, what was your routine during the 2-year preparation, and especially in the last 2 months or on that D-Day. So if you can elaborate on how you may plan your day on a typical day during this 2-year journey, and then during last 2 months and on that D-Day. So what were the thoughts on that D-Day?
Right. Okay. So initially, when I began, in 11th, I usually consider that my prep started in 11th grade itself. So it was just, that time we had offline classes. So I would go to class and then come back and have some background work, like version of the theory that was taught, maybe for that particular day, or the entire chapter that was taught, like when the chapter ends, or like the practice material that was given to us to solve. I would solve that. And then a really good idea that was given to me was that I should, you all might have experienced it by now. Are they only 12th standard students or 11th standard?
These are 11th and a few from 10th standard.
Okay, okay. So you will come to experience it, but the JEE syllabus is really vast. And so having the entire syllabus in your mind, and that is one really important. So what was recommended to me was that I should revise the previous 4 5 months on Sundays. So usually we used to have a 3-hour test on Sunday, and then after that I would revise. And initially I didn't keep a lot of track about how long am I studying, or uh, when I need to do what. It was somewhat spontaneous, but when lockdown began, it was really much more planned. So 11th was basically more of exploring myself, like, developing that interest in the subject, uh, having like getting into a sort of a timetable of having to consistently work hard towards something. So JEE is not just a race; it is a 2-year long marathon that you all have to run. So you can't just have one particular day you study for 16 hours, and then if you are not studying for the next 2 days, then it's basically useless. So instead, having studying for 10 hours, 9 hours, and then slowly pushing it up to 11, 12 daily for a long span of time, possibly 1 month, 3 months, like that. That is better. So uh, what I was, 1 second. So I used to have a regular revision on Sunday where I used to revise, and it was not something but basically where I felt, I've not revised for some time, or maybe I missed a topic, a question from this topic in the last 2 3 tests. So I would revise that. And afterwards, when lockdown began, and then we were really, pushed to work hard. So in those stages, like around 8 to 10 months before the exam, we were studying for like really long hours. So 12 hours a day was 13 was the maximum that I did, and I could do it only for 3 days in my prep, 3 or 4 days maybe. So 12 hours is something basically I found it to be quite adequate. You're studying for 12 hours, and that includes lectures as well, not just self-study, because if you're attending 4 hours of lecture and 12 hours of self-study, that is just somewhat too much. So studying for longer durations, and then spending, like somewhat of a planned effort, not just randomly picking up any book whenever you want and then solving one chapter from it and then leaving. So you need to have somewhat of a long-term plan in mind, and you should really discuss that with your teachers as well. So they can point out some minor errors that you can rectify upon. They will give you better recommendations as well. Because you have just experienced being one student, but they have taught many students, and they can guide you much better than what you're probably expecting. So having good contact with your teachers is also one important thing. And then afterwards, when I came really close to the exam, I used to solve a lot of practice papers. And in the last week before the exam, last one and a half week, I reduced practice a lot, because if you come across a question and then you're not able to solve it at that stage, you'll really suddenly lose a lot of confidence. Like, my exam is so close and I'm not able to solve this question. What if something similar happens during the exam? So the last one and a half week was purely revision, and it was just to cool off my mind, not having to take too much of stress. Especially for advanced, mains is still manageable, but advanced really requires you to have a clear mind and completely focused. You cannot. It's a 6 hour long. Your brain gets grilled actually. So sitting there, you need to keep cool, keep calm, and be focused, because that is essentially the day that matters. And then everybody tells you, don't take too much stress, keep calm. And so on the exam day, I was feeling very light, although there was some sort of stress involved, obviously, but I was not quite feeling it. So I began my paper, and then I started with physics. And the first question, I was not able to solve it, and it was a really easy question. I had solved hundreds of questions like this during my prep. So then, I took a deep breath. I stopped myself. I was like, stop taking stress. It's an easy question. And then for that moment, I skipped that question. And then when I came back to it around 1 hour later, I solved it within 1. So that is what, having a calm mindset is really important. During and There was one slight mistake that I made during my paper, was that at the end of the first paper, I was not thinking that I don't need to take stress and all that. So I felt like perhaps I'd given the paper a little too casually. So during the 2 hour break, 2.5 hour break that I had, that was a thought that was running through my mind. So I was starting to feel a little more stressed for the second paper, and that was possibly the mistake that I made, because my second paper performance was quite lower than my first paper performance. And so coming back to the question again, so 2 months before the exam, it's solving a lot of practice papers, and realizing where you're lacking in terms of theory, in terms of practice. And the last 1 week, 2 weeks are just for calming yourself and clearing up all the rough corners, smoothing them, and just keeping calm. Because if you lose your cool before the exam, it will just, even questions that you can solve, you won't be able to solve.
Yeah, so that was really wonderful insight, Siddhant. What one point which you have mentioned, which I really like and would like to emphasize, is like for you or any other student, it is the first time they are giving exam, or someone is giving second time, but the teacher who are teaching you, they might have seen students like you, they might have learned what type of mistakes students usually do. It is really going to help if students are in connect with their teachers and discuss with them. If they are shying away from things, like, they won't get that result. So, and based on whatever you described so far, it is not always the concept which will give you the result. It is concepts, strategies, dedication, commitment, right? All these things put together will give you such results. So I would like students to make note of such things, right? It is not always the concepts. That is not the only thing, right? There are other things as well. So we will we have such strategies with us. So definitely to our student, we will help during this 2-year journey. So so moving on to next thing. So I just wanted to check, did you ever get thoughts that I should give up JEE now? It is not my cup of tea, or my friends are really enjoying their life, and where I am just sitting for 12 hours and studying. So, uh, what was your thought process during that time?
Right. So there were two aspects based on which there were regular thoughts that I should give up JEE. The first one that I already mentioned was that I felt like I had already lost the competition when I joined when I started my prep in ninth grade. So that thought was there that there are some people who have already reached so far in terms of knowledge, in terms of preparation, and I am already starting to lag behind. That was one aspect when I really wanted to give up JEE, but there was really a good amount of motivation from my teachers, my family as well. They kept me on track, and then around 11th, when I reached I had that certain motivation level, was when I started working hard for the exam. And the second aspect which you mentioned was that it really, I felt that a lot of times during lockdown, there are people who are before lockdown as well. Actually, there are people who are roaming around, having fun with friends and colleges, playing online games, and I am stuck here. So essentially, what I feel that nobody is actually happy when they are preparing for JEE. It is a completely different mindset that you are in at stage. But there are a lot of learnings involved. Even if you don't crack the exam and you're preparing seriously, you will learn a lot of things while you're preparing. So that is one thing that you'll actually realize after the exam, after it's completed. So that is something that I'm realizing right now. So now that I have time to think about how things were and how I was 2 years ago and how I am now, there's a huge change that has taken place. And there are a lot of learnings involved. So preparing for JEE is not just about, it is not just preparing for that exam. It trains you in certain ways for life.
Yes.
So although many people will get thoughts of quitting JEE, like I said, I feel nobody is happy when preparing for JEE, but still, even if you can pull through, there will be drops in interest and morale from time to time. It's practically impossible to stay the same way for 2 years. But still, if you can manage to pull through, it will be something that you'll be, glad, something that you'll be happy about at the end.
Yeah. So I know, but during this phase, like how you used to cut down the distraction which is happening around, or how you were managing TV time, mobile time. If you can guide students, it will help them.
Okay, so I didn't have a TV at home, but I did some days. I did spend a lot of time on my mobile. So there are certain times, when you feel like, where am I stuck? I don't want to do this, and then your interest completely. Like no matter how interested you are in the subject, those times will come. Once in 2 months, once in 6 months. Uh, as a student, it is your duty to try to minimize that, but obviously you can't cut it down to zero.
Mhm.
So managing that time well is like, you can spend one day, 1 week, but then when you're preparing, you'll start to feel like, I need to get back to that. So reducing that time span of starting to waste time and then having that thought is something that you can try to work upon. So reducing that time span, so essentially there were times when I did lose interest, like I don't want to study this anymore, and I'm just sitting here for hours and like, things like that. So but and especially in online education, where we all get our links, like meeting links and some documents or whatever are uploaded, we get them on our phones or laptops only. So there was one phase during lockdown where I was, constantly checking for updates, every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes, and that drastically reduced the quality of my study. So depending upon the environment, like I gradually developed a lot of self-control. Some people may require the support of their parents or their siblings or their teachers. But getting that self-control eventually to realizing what you need to be doing is something that you can learn.
Yeah, and see, in while preparing JEE, especially during the lockdown, right? For entire duration, you were at home. All the classes were from home. So otherwise, you would have spent 5-6 hours at the coaching classes, and the rest, like you mentioned, you joined dummy colleges. So as per you, I know there are few parents who has joined the call. So what type of support is needed for a student who is studying for JEE? Any environmental changes, like you mentioned, you didn't have a TV at home. So anything which you would like to share with the parent, that as a student, what type of support they can provide?
Okay, so this would be quite subjective because depending upon the relation that you have with your parents and the environment that you have at home, it can differ. But what I feel is that, like I mentioned before, I started to like being dependent. So my parents didn't interfere a lot with my studies, and I managed that on my own. But my parents were also not from the science field, so they did, although they could have used their contacts to try and guide me, but I usually preferred having to explore things on my own. But if somebody's parents are quite knowledgeable in this field, and if they're comfortable, students are comfortable, they can share things with their parents and ask them for their help. So like some of my friends, their parents actually had studied the same thing, so they used to help and guide them regarding how to study, and they used to help them as well in terms of studying. They used to teach them at home sometimes regarding whatever help they need. So what I feel is that if you're not comfortable having your parents, also there's one thing that if parents like if the child has some idea that they wanted to try out some particular way of attempting some particular way of studying, unless the parent feels that unless the parent feels that it's really wrong, they shouldn't immediately say no to them. Let them try that thing, because even if it is wrong, they will learn from it, and when they learn from their own experience, it will be really impactful instead of having somebody else say no and then you try it at all. But in the end, again, JEE is there's a time limit, so you can't have them explore every mistake and then each mistake. So unless it is too wrong, usually I would prefer that if parents did not immediately restrict them from doing something. And another thing was that although my parents didn't interfere with my studies, but they always ensured that whenever I needed to talk to someone, they were there. So they were there to listen to me, and they were there to motivate me and guide me whenever I asked for it. So that was one thing that was there. And so at my home, everybody ensured that nobody would disturb me at all. Even in lockdown, where again we had to start doing everything on our own. My parents tried to avoid having to make me work for household things because of my preparation. Uh, and it was possible. So I usually studied in a separate room. So while my parents worked from home in a different room, I studied here because they had their calls and it would be disturbing. So that was another thing. So it was a very supportive environment where they ensured that I was not disturbed and I could study on my own and work on my own. But they were also there and ensured that was supported and I was not completely alone in software.
Good. So, you mentioned the parents played a critical role in success, in your success. So, any other things which you would like to share, which contributed to your success?
Okay, so coincidentally, there were some things that worked out quite well for my preparation. So, like I mentioned before, I was really low on confidence when I actually started in ninth grade, and I felt, the people around me, they understood things much better than I understood it. So I used to talk to my friends, try to get some advice from them, study, and but different people told different things because in the end, we are all different individuals. Something that works for me may not work for somebody else. So different people started telling me different things. I got even more confused. Then I approached my teachers for my guidance. And that was probably the best thing that I did during my JEE preparation. I regularly used to contact my teachers and to ask them, this is the issue that I'm facing. What could I do regarding that? And they guided me well. And uh, approaching your teachers and asking them for their help would be one of the best things to do during a preparation. And other than that, it was regular, consistent work that practice that helped me crack the exam. So, like, even if, let's say, there is a really talented person who's capable of getting all India rank one, as let's say, but even if he hasn't worked for the 2 years, let's say he just decided 1 week before the exam, okay, I'll give JEE advance. Let's see what happens. So he may not even end up with the rank of 1,000 or 2,000 because JEE is not purely a measure of talent. There are multiple things involved. You need to obviously you need to have a good understanding of the subjects, but you also this syllabus is really huge. So you need to have had planned efforts regarding when to study and what to study, and you need to have practiced a lot. Practice is also a really important factor, and having a good exam temperament is another thing because if you start feeling stressed or pressured, the questions that you can solve also would the marks that you could get also would go out of your hands. So uh, and another thing that I did was that I solved mock papers and previous year papers at home like the exam. So I would tell my parents one day before that I'm going to solve this paper tomorrow. So from 9 to 12, 2:30 to 5:30, do not enter the room as far as possible. Sometimes it was unavoidable, so they did. But then yeah, so like the actual exam, you sit for one place at 6 hours and you solve the paper. You have one rough booklet with you, and if it's possible, use online platforms. So I used to solve from PDFs and uh, and not like you just see one question and then you're like, okay, 1 second, I need this, and you check your book and then try it again. that is something that you should. Solving the paper like an actual paper, like you're actually going to give it. So during the exam, the only thing that you have to do is get marks, which is the bottom line. So, there are some questions during the paper, like if you're actually solving some questions, you won't have 100% going to. So even during a mock paper, even if you're really interested in the question and you spend 10 minutes, then that is not something that you can and you should do during the exam. So skipping that question and then moving on to the next question, you should be searching for marks because that is the that is the bottom line that you have to score. So that is basically I just elaborate upon solving the paper as an actual paper. You should try to.
So, how much you were scoring during the mock paper? Did it happen that your graph was consistently going up, or there were few ups and downs?
Okay, so initially, like when after syllabus was completed and we wrote a lot of mock tests, initially I used to score around 50%, 45-50% during advanced papers, and if some questions, some papers were really hard, it could even go down to 30%. So, like I think FITG's All India Test Series is quite famous for making really hard papers. So I didn't solve a lot of those papers, but yeah, when I solved them, my score would be really less. And I tried to identify what was going wrong, why particular subjects or chapters are lagging behind, and trying to balance the three subjects and simultaneously working upon the weak chapters. So that gradually increased my score. There were some mock papers in which I even got up to 80% advanced papers, and uh, there was one dip in between after my mains. So I performed really well in mains, and nobody else in my batch, sorry, nobody else in my batch performed that well. So it slightly got to my head, that I've performed really well, and this was the JEE exam that I just wrote. So that thing sort of hurt my preparation, and I there was a slight dip in between after my mains where I started scoring a little less and others started to pick up and they crossed my score. So then I again start that mindset change again took place and I started working hard. There was one tip at that point.
So yeah, so Siddhant, like after hearing you, I feel that you have similar type of feelings or behavioral trait which any other student will have. So it is not like a topper will have a different way of thinking or feeling. So so on that line, so means, even though you score really good mark, but end of the day, it's a human being. We our dil mange more, right? So you might be thinking like, though I got 160, I could have done better. I would have gone like AR10 and all that. So if you look back, what your journey was, so anything you would want to correct it, what that will be? Any mistake you had done, anything you want to correct if you have to reappear for JEE?
Yes. So one thing that immediately to my mind is that ever since lockdown began, I totally avoided all physical activities. I just wake up and have my breakfast and then sit down, start solving, start revising. Uh, and then basically I used to only get up for meals and sometimes in between when I was feeling slightly bored, I'd lie down on my bed and spend on 15-20 minutes, talking to my friends or watching something. So that is something that I would definitely work upon, that having at least a little bit of physical activities during your preparation, although not a lot, like you can't go and play for cricket for 4 hours or something like that, but at least, having a basic, to basically work your joints and slightly get your circulation going. That is something that you should definitely do, and that is something that I wish I could have corrected. Everybody told it to me a lot of times, but then at the end, I avoided it. But physical activity is something that I wish I had done during my preparation. And another thing is that like I said before, sort of lost focus a little bit after my mains. So I got All India rank 73 and there was practically no one close to me. Like I was the only digit ranker in my batch and my friends. So although like that is what it is, the JEE Advanced is a 2-year long marathon that you have to run. So you can't just pause in between and lose your focus. It is something that requires constant work. And so that although like I had felt it, I that was something I thought about in 10th. Basically, I can't let things get to my head. Like I've performed so well, everybody else performed this good. So I had thought about it, but then it happened to me. It was quite, I feel it was quite natural, and I perhaps I could have avoided it, but in the end, what happened is that I lost focus, and I tried to like to have avoided that as well. And another mistake that I made was that, like I shared before, I lost my interest in the subjects in ninth grade when I felt that my friends were so much more knowledgeable, and they were in fact, but losing my confidence way too early was another mistake that I made. I tried to draw conclusions very fast. So again, this is another thing that happens in advance. It's not something. It's not a matter of one day. 10 days. So you can't just if you have a test on next Sunday, let's say. So you can't study for 7 days and then completely expect a result. That will happen in the beginning of 11th, but then from 12th onwards, when you start writing full syllabus tests or subject-wise full tests, that will it's not going to happen. It requires a long-term effort. So you can't. It's wrong to draw conclusions very fast. So even if you start working well with a good amount of focus, you're sitting for long hours and you're feeling like things are going good, but initially you'll find no change. You'll start to see the change 1 month, 2 months later, and again when you see that you've had some positive change, if you relax again, it's going to go down, and you see that 1 month later. And if you continue the cycle, it might be too late for your preparation. So having constant focus and studies is something that is really important, and I can't emphasize upon that enough. But yes, that is you shouldn't try to draw conclusions too early when studying for it. It takes time for changes to appear. So keep that.
Thanks, Siddhant, for honestly sharing your mistake. Not everyone can do that. Okay, so on the chat also, I am getting few questions. So like mostly parents or the student would like to know this is about more about the time management. Even you study for 2 years, you know everything, but within that stipulated time, how you ensure that you do justice to all the section and ensure you answer the question. So how did you do the time management is people are interested in hearing that any guidance you can provide on the time management while solving the paper.
Right. Again, so this is somewhat subjective. Different people, different style suits the best for certain. So there's something that I developed unknowingly was that I had a sort of randomness in my paper solving, the way I solved the paper. So what I would do was it's not it really helped me well actually in advance. So when you're writing your paper, again every advanced paper is very different. You never know what is going to come up. So sometimes physics is very easy and sometimes physics is the hardest. Sometimes chemistry may be very easy and sometimes chemistry can be very theoretical and confusing, and you feel like chemistry is my scoring subject, and if I can't even get a good score here, then what will happen in physics and math? So you start to lose confidence during the paper, which is something that is 100%, that is something that should not come to your mind at all. Because when you start thinking about things that are different from the questions during those 6 hours, then you are going, the paper is not going to go well. So what strategy that I used to solve the paper was that I didn't have a fixed subject to start from, a fixed section to start from. So again, there were some mistakes that I made during this random paper solving that I learned. So uh, I didn't. I essentially I looked at the type of questions and I would think, okay, let's start with chemistry this time. Sometimes I would start with math. Sometimes I would start with physics. So although it also has a fillable aspect that I started apparently with the hardest subject in the paper. That can also happen, but when you have practiced it for a long time, it stops bothering you actually. Some people are there that have that keep track in their mind, that those people keep track in their mind. I started with physics, I left 3 questions, then I came to chemistry, I left 5 questions. That is something that I unknowingly or knowingly never, subconsciously never did. The only thing that I focused upon was the current question. So I would start with a random subject, a random paper, a random section. One day, if I felt, so when I saw the question types, I'd feel like, okay, let's start with physics, single correct. Sometimes I'd say, let's start with chemistry, multiple. So, and then sometimes, like I left maybe 1 question, 2 questions, I randomly change the subject. Like, if it feels like I'm leaving any questions, I'll change the subject and go start solving the other sections of the other subjects. So it sort of resets your brain, and overall, I feel that it boosted my confidence a lot while solving the papers because there was nothing fixed. Like I started with physics, and then let's say some people they start with question one, they do question two, question three, question four, like that up to the last question. So I personally never liked it because then I sort of like this random mindset instead of this fixed mindset. Because if let's say again the questions are randomized, so what is question one for you may not be question one for somebody else. That is the algorithm that they use while setting the paper. So it may happen that all the hardest questions for you came up together. So question 4, 5, 6, 7 are the hardest questions in the particular subject, and they came in that particular order to you. So you will start after question 4, you'll feel like, okay, let's try the next question. Question 5, okay, this is also not happening. And then by question 7, you may completely lose your willingness to solve the paper. So uh, this random question, if, let's say if this happened to me, I'd see question 5, and then I'd go, let's say, go to question 11. So yeah, like I said, it resets your brain, and it boosted my confidence a lot by solving the, because it felt like I was in control of the paper instead of the paper controlling me. So that is what I solved. And time management is something. So essentially, over time, I felt like I had developed this. Is that uh, there were, so you can group questions into 2, 3 categories. So the first category would be something that you immediately understand how to solve, and you can solve it within a short span of time. Let's say 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So those should be the questions that you should try to do as soon as you see them. And then there's a second category that you understood the question, but it's going to take time. So that should be something that you solved in the second round. And then there are some questions which you completely did not understand and have no idea where to begin. Those are the questions that you should leave for the last moments. So that is something that can help you manage time well. So when you're solving easy to do questions from the beginning, you'll feel like I've solved so many questions, and then that you'll have that in mind that okay, I have so much time left and I have solved so many questions. Again, that boosts your confidence. Anything that will boost your confidence during the paper is something that you should definitely do, and anything that drains your confidence is something you should totally avoid.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, it is not, there is no prescription as such that you should do in certain fashion. It is more, like you mentioned, it is subjective, like whatever works for best may not be right thing for the other person, right? So, and it will develop over the period, right? It is not on day one, you will be ready with perfect plan, right? As you solve more and more paper, you will get an idea how you should manage your time. So, good. So, and You have also mentioned that you enrolled yourself into a dummy college. So how that helped? Because usually, if till 10th we try to see that we want to enroll in a good board, good college, right? So after that, then like say initially in CBSE and ICSE, then switching to dummy college and that to state board. So did that time? Did you or your parents felt that okay, how can I degrade myself? So, what was the thought process? Why you choose dummy college?
So my father did feel a lot like I should perform well in 12th grades as well. Something that he really wanted me to. But by some time, like all of us realized that essentially JEE is what is going to matter more, and preparing for
Absolutely.
JEE is more important.
Yes.
So my my mother some also helped me convince my father, and a bad thing that my college did was that it completely avoided board studies. So before actually boards got cancelled, I there was a period of 2 3 weeks where I was really stressed and I had to start studying for boards. So like when you are studying for JEE, you'll automatically find boards to be a lot easier, but then the format is quite different, and that's something that you get used to because you'll have to write subjective answers, you'll have to write the things, otherwise
Yes.
the paper check is not going to give you marks, even if your answer is correct. There are certain formalities that you follow.
Yes. Yes. So, Ms. During studying for JEE, also one should take care of board because the pattern is different. Otherwise, at the last moment, we will get bogged down by the board uh, paper writing pattern, and that will distract from the JEE studies, right? So, along with our JEE study, if we can take care of board parallelly, I think that will also help in keeping calm and ensuring you don't get stressed up during the board exam. Right? So
Right.
that's
So from the beginning itself, like personally, I never gave any related exams. Again, that was mismanagement from my college side. But having gave at least one or two exams, I would have felt better. And I don't know what all of your colleges does, but I never even bought 11th standard books. So because I never needed it actually because there were no exams. But yeah, if you're if you get to study for 11th, you should do it. But again, when you're studying for JEE, you'll find boards to, and you're getting the hang of it, you'll start to find that boards is much easier. So it's not going to require a lot of time and effort, but still, weekly devoting at least 3 hours, 4 hours when the exams are far away and the exams come near, like after mains, when you're going to give your board exams, there are 1 or 2 weeks that you need to devote almost entirely to. While it will degrade your JEE performance, after boards you will feel that it might JEE score suddenly goes down. That will happen because the level and the format is quite different. But boards also has it has certain importance that respect and acknowledge. So you will need to devote some time at least and get good to decent percentage according to.
yeah, and I think you have covered one thing I wanted to ask. You covered it to certain extent, but still specifically, I want to know like how important is joining or studying at a big brand and their previous result versus the faculties and management you work with. You mentioned there is a crucial role the faculties or the teachers plays in the success of the student. So what are your thoughts? Like, shall we run behind the big brands previous results, or what are your thoughts?
Okay, so running uh, in the end, management is not going to contribute almost completely. It's not going to contribute to JEE preparation and result. It's what uh, the teachers award, they actually the effort that they put in to help you prepare. They are the ones that matter. So like even I went for a big brand, but then the brand name eventually died down. and right now it's not a valid rank, I
Okay.
feel.
Yeah. Fine, Miss. We don't want to talk about anything, but just in case I know few parents are there, and means, those question I am getting on chat. So thought of checking with you. So by now, I know you have failed or applied to certain colleges, right? So at what point you decided this college, this branch? Is it too early for the student who are still in 11 preparing for JEE? So is it too early for them to decide a college branch, or uh, if, what are your views for that?
Okay, so yes, I feel it's definitely too early for people. There are some people who are they are really passionate about something. They feel like they want to study mechanical engineering, or some people want to study computer science only. So unless you have that, and actually some people uh, they may not have a complete idea or picture about the thing, but they may go after it based on perception. So until you actually start it, you not it's actually about. So yes, I feel it is way too early for you to start thinking about which college or which branch that you join, unless you are really passionate about one particular. And like I feel it's a bad thing to say, but JEE may sometimes kill your passion regarding some things while you're preparing. It's 2 years of being somewhat isolated, and you're forced to study something. Sometimes, like there is one person, one friend of mine. He was really talented and really passionate about maths, but he hated chemistry with all his heart. So he could not do well in JEE because that is like all three subjects are required and you have a good balance among the three subjects. So while talent is not purely your JEE rank is not purely indicative of talent, but keeping certain ideas in mind is okay. Like having some ideas regarding college and branch is okay, but still, when the time to seriously start thinking about it, I feel should be after your exam, which is when I started it. So the thought that I had in mind when I was preparing for J is that try to get as good of a rank as possible, because the better your rank, more options will be open for you, and you can choose basically what you want to do instead of having that mindset that I am getting this, and I am being forced to choose. I am getting these, so I have to choose from these. I am not getting something that I actually want. So during your preparation, you should rather focus on the three subjects and trying to like get the best rank that you can. Because when you have a good rank, you can again choose from your passions. I
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I am getting this, and this, but I am going. No, I am getting all the options that I want, but I'm going after this option that I want from my heart. And it is okay, like if you're not feeling 100% passionate, there are like even I did not have a strong feeling like I need to take up this branch only. This is what I was meant for. It's okay if you don't have that feeling. Most people don't have it, and it's your bachelor's degree may be in some field, but you can phase out of it and enter a new branch also. So it's not like you have to stick to it, and you may lose interest in something that you have interest in right now. That
Mhm.
will happen over time. So keeping a fixed mindset that I have to enter this branch only is not something that I would recommend. Your interest can change over time as well.
Yeah. So that's really wonderful. I know, like this where a lot of this question which we discussed must be all our students must be pondering on that, and kind of distracting them from their study. So I think a lot of question which we discuss will clarify the doubts they have in mind and help them focus more on the study. So it was a really helpful session, at least for me, and I hope same for the other students and parents on the call. So in interest of time, before we close, Siddhant, anything you want to share, anything we missed out or anything, feel free to share with this group.
So firstly, I wanted to thank Pankaj sir and Mamta ma'am for giving me this wonderful platform to talk about. So I love talking about JEE, and it was really a big honor for me. And also thanks to Pankaj sir and Mamta ma'am for their guidance. One thing that students feel, like personally, that was something that I felt too, was that they feel some people who have started from fifth grade or eighth grade itself preparing for JEE, having that mindset, they feel like they are going to lose to them or some that sort of emotion. So one thing that I felt throughout my preparation is that pre-found the basically starting before 11th is not something that is necessary, and it does not guarantee that you will do. So there was one boy in my school who started from eighth grade, I think. He started preparing for JEE in eighth grade, but he did much worse than he performed much worse than I had performed. So that emotion is something that you can avoid having being surrounded by students who have started preparing for JEE. Personally, I feel that JEE is something that you are meant to do for 2 years only, because more than 2 years, it's sort of a torture actually preparing for JEE. It is not something that you will like while you're preparing for it, but it is something that you will look back upon possibly with happy memories after the end of it. And there are some things that that are objective that everyone should follow, having regular practice, having a good idea of the syllabus, and revising regularly. But there are some things that are completely subjective. So like what paper attempting strategy some people follow, how long people are studying for, and how much how on which days of the week they're studying. So such things are subjective, and you should find something and discuss with your teachers and find something that suits you. And you can't just like some books that toppers are referring to. You'll come across a lot of questions on social media that which books did this person use for their JEE preparation. Every book has its pros and cons, and each book will help you improve upon yourself in certain ways. But which book will be the best for you during your preparation is something that you should consult your teachers, and they will guide you better than your friends actually, because your friends also have been preparing for JEE the same amount of time as you, and they have almost the same exposure. But your teachers, they have been teaching for years. They have read and possibly solved all of the books that are in the market. So they will guide you better than that. And again, they have a better all India picture of things than you. So they see you just have experience being one student and like 4 or 5 friends. You will know only their JEE journey, but teachers have taught hundreds of students in every batch. So they have a certain understanding of things that is much better than what. So like they will selflessly guide you. There's only one selfishness involved in every teacher's guidance, that is they want to get the best performance from you. That is the only selfish motive that they have. So
that is good to have, and I expect like everyone should have that. Otherwise, I think they are not the good teacher, is what I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I would recommend everybody to do is that the previous year papers that you have, you should avoid doing them while like you'll come across books at the end of the chapter. At the end of the questions, you'll find previous year questions, and then like basically you'll find it at the end of each subject, at the end of each chapter. Sorry. So you should try to avoid solving previous year questions chapter wise. You should solve previous year papers as a whole, like for sitting for 6 hours and solving them in the last 2 to 5 months of your preparation. If you solve it very close to your exam, and let's say if you get a bad score, you're going to develop certain perceptions in your mind, which again you should not do. So don't solve them very close to the exam as well, and don't solve them very far away from your exam as well, like 1 year before the exam, because that is not going to be very indicative of how well you are actually going to perform. Because there is a lot of practice that you're going to do after that. You're going to revise again and get better at the theory and the subjects. So I feel 2 to 5 or 6 months before the exam is the best time to solve previous year papers. And JEE is not just about talent. It's not a measure of only talent. While you do need a certain amount of talent, there is also hard work, consistent, and like I said before, if you come across people studying for 16 hours a day, they probably can't maintain that for a long time. They can maintain that for maybe at max one, 2 weeks, but after that they'll burn out and then end up wasting the further days. So, well, everybody's day is only going to have 24 hours. So it's about the effective use of the time that you have, and not just about using as much time as you can. So even if you study well for let's say 10 hours or 12 hours, it is going to be much better than, and you can actually manage that for a long time. Studying for 12 hours, let's say, what I personally did was around 11 and a half hours. I studied for 3 weeks very well. And so something that you can maintain for a long amount of time. And now you should not say that I can only maintain 4 hours. So I study for 4 hours and I'll do that for the entire 2 years. So you should have a decent amount of time where you can work really well, and you should try to slowly push yourself out of your comfort zone. So because growth, you will only grow in that case when you try to move out of your comfort zone. So if you say I can only study for 4 hours, and then that is not right. So if you can only study for 4 hours, then next week you should try for 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. And then 12 hours is something I feel everybody will get saturated upon. If you can maintain, I came across a friend who maintained studying for 12 hours a day for 6 months, and it really worked out well for him. So consistency is something that is really required for JEE, and in the end, having that exam temperament of not getting stressed is also one very important, because like there are some people who work really well, really hard for this, but in the end they lost out because they could not manage the paper. So having a cool mind is also something that is very, and I think that's it from my side. Thank you,
Yeah, so
everyone.
those were wonderful point. Like I missed that. Like there are student, not everyone joined foundation in 9th or 10th, so they feel that they missed the bus. The same case happened with you. So, like you mentioned, it is not that's something. Because I personally saw people or student who joined so early, by they reach the 10th standard, they lose the complete focus and it becomes saturated for them. So, like based on your experience, someone who has cracked JEE and saying that 2 years is enough, so that is something I think students should make a note of it, right? And also after means we will be arranging this type of sessions going forward, and because it is a marathon effort, and consistency and keeping motivation level high is the key for the success in JEE. Right, so we will have a similar session, but end of the day I would like to mention, this is my personal view, that a JEE score is not going to define your success and growth in the life, right? It is your attitude and how you take up things, right? It is just a measure that how much potential you have, and it gives you a good break. But because of that, don't get burned out and don't stretch yourself too much. Means you need to push boundary, but at the same time maintain a balance, right? Because I feel that any score in the exam is not going to define success and growth in the life, right? So with that, I would like to thank Siddhant and all the students who carved out time for this webinar, and wishing you all the best, Siddhant, for the future. May you achieve everything that you want and make your parents proud.
I also, when said this, I've heard somebody say that IIT is not the destination; it is just the next stop. So having that in your mind, like some people who don't crack JEE, they feel like failures in life. That is totally not true. Having a good JEE score does not automatically make you successful. Having a bad JEE score does not automatically make you a failure. What matters is what you do after that. And essentially the essence is quite well caught up in these words. IIT is not the destination; it is just the next stop.
Great, great. So with that, I would like to thanks everyone, and then we will wrap up. I know today is Sunday, so everyone has their plan. So thanks once again, and we'll close the call. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.